So one of the favorite times of the year for us at bourbonblog.com is really anytime we get bourbon, but also the fall. A lot of great releases. One of those being the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. And in this box I have samples of each because we're going to try all 5 of them today. The first one I've actually poured here is the William Larue Weller, because Weller has become so popular. It's always been popular, but with the explosion of Pappy and the thoughts of, well, could any of the Wellers taste like a younger Pappy, and the conversations that have led to those discoveries the last few years. Wellers in general are tougher to find than they used to be. Whether we're talking about the antique collection or some of the classics, the 12-year-old Weller, this one is actually about 12 years old. It was distilled in the winter of 2007 and then dumped in 2019. It's 128 proof. It is, of course, a wheated bourbon, and you're looking at really same recipe that you love on Weller, just a whole lot older. So I've already poured a little of this and had a sip of this because I really want to see what the softness of the wheat is doing here. Especially at such a high proof and such an older age than we would typically be used to. With this selection versus any of the other 12-year-old selections, you're going to have something completely different. First of all, it's a whole different selection for the antique collection, and second, it is at a higher proof. So let's give it a try. Let's give it a nose here. And immediately, I'm getting off the nose, in a very delightful fashion, more sweetness, more of an elegant, refined sweetness than I would say other Wellers have. Other Wellers have that, and they have the softness of that sweetness, but that sweetness hits me a whole lot more with the vanilla's, just the soft kind of powdered sugar nature, but refined. All right, so I will be honest, the tasting notes that this came with on the press release and in all the materials said coffee. And I try to ignore those until actually I'm tasting it. But if it was any type of coffee, I'd say it's a very candied coffee. It's a very, in a good way, it's like those flavors that you get that are the candied barrels. So I'd say candied coffee, really nice softness, 128 proof. Doesn't feel like 128 proof at all on the palate. It is warm, and I love high proof whiskeys, but this drink's much closer, I would say, to let me think about it. I'd say it drinks closer to like 105 or so. So soft, good complexity, well-rounded. It's very gentle, and gentle. Some boldness, really beautiful. Again, the William Larue Weller 2019 selection of the antique collection. If I had to come up with one other note, because I want you to imagine this with me, and if you've actually tried these, please tell us below what you think. I mean, creamy is a description. If I was going to say kind of a creamy, almost, not exactly tropical, but a soft kind of a creamy coconut cookie against coffee, barrel. I don't know why I'm getting coconut, I'm just getting kind of that nice, gentle flake of sweetness. Really delicious. Let's move on to the next. Sazerac. So the Sazerac's the oldest one. It is a rye, oldest one of this year. It's 18 years old this year. Now, I'm not exactly sure why I picked it to be second, except for the fact that I reached into the box and different. There's this is a nice fall day, and there's a nice kind of crisp nature to this rye. It's 18 years old, and there's a certain thing that happens to a rye when it gets above the 12-year mark, 15. Older it gets, there's this thing that happens to that spiciness of the rye that kind of takes it and arcs it up a little bit and pushes it against that barrel, and starts bringing things that I would say like a bourbon has at 10 years old and then 20. It has some of those same things, but they intensify. Obviously, there's some enhancements made. With a rye, I feel like there's things it definitely has at near 20 years old versus what it had at 10, as compared to a bourbon that you'd have never got. Onto rye, it builds, arcs, and gets something completely new. So it's always a delight to try a rye that's like 15 plus. There's just a nice fresh zest to this, but extremely, just extremely like tempting on the nose. Let me taste it once again. So those developments into that more mature rye have happened. Really nice. Almost, there's sort of this thing between tobacco and mint that I'm getting. So if you think of like a nice cigar plus a nice kind of mintiness, I'm getting that. I'm definitely getting this tobacco slash mint that hangs on up here mid palate. The one thing, so I really like it, and I think that it's a really beautiful rye. The one thing I probably would say that I don't like about it, if there was one thing, and again, nice all the way through, except the finish on this one. I'm wanting more of a finish, and that can happen on an older rye. For some reason, it doesn't. Maybe what it's doing is for this year's release, making up in that mid palate area with those tobacco and minty notes that I don't get on the finish. So, Sazerac 18-year-old rye from the 2019 Antique Buffalo Trace Collection. All right, so I've gone for the Eagle Rare. This one is 17 years old, and 2002 is what we're going back to. So think about what you were doing in 2002. I'll just say this too. 1974, the brand was launched at 101 proof, and for a while, for the Antique Collection, it was 90 proof, and then it went back to 101 last year in honor of that 1974 release. This year, it's again at 101 proof. So think about what you love about the Eagle Rare release. That's a little easier to find, and still remarkable. We're going to go to this one. And a lot's happened, right? So with that extra aging at around 10 years old, you're going to find it's gone a lot deeper into some of those, I call them kind of like the juicy notes, because some people will say like, ooh, I get some syrup notes, not like bad syrup, like maple syrup or honeyed, but I think those are like really juicy notes of bourbon. So I get a beautiful barrel juiciness on this. That's really, it's gotten into that barrel without feeling like too much of that barrel's happened. That's what some enthusiast, not a big fan of when it comes to some of the older releases of bourbons, 20 plus. Like, oh, I get so much barrel. It's just, and it's beautiful. And I actually really like it. But for those of you that really love a lot of that deep wood, and that warehouse nature, this gives you that, but in a refined way where it doesn't feel over-oaked. Milk chocolate, of course. Nice sort of dusting of a hot chocolate. Extremely warming, very solid. Very true, like what's up with a good Kentucky bourbon too. So the Eagle Rare, 17-year-old, 2019 Antique Buffalo Trace Collection. So we had a bourbon in between the two ryes. Now we're going back to another rye, that being the Thomas Handy Rye. This is uncut, unfiltered, at 125.7 proof. So we had one rye. And there was a lot that I liked on it. The thing that I was not as big a fan of was the lack of finish. But again, at 18 years old, great rye at 90 proof. This, I can already tell, hits in a whole different way. There's a lot of that barrel-soaked, juicy goodness that I was talking about before. There's a buttery nature to this. There's a lot of creamy vanillas underneath. There's a candy I'm getting on this. It may be maybe just kind of like I get this kind of almost really pure vanilla pod against butterscotch. So it has this creamy, really elegant candy, almost pastry-like, maybe a little drizzle of some sort of strudel. I mean, it has that kind of pastry shop thing, but the end is much bigger. The finish is much bolder and has a nice linger to it. Maybe I'm coming closer to telling you what my favorite is if I was going to go for one, regardless of price point, because what this is about is helping you understand what this year's selection is like. I'm really liking this. A lot of those, as you walk into a rick house, and there's that dustiness, but against a creamy sweetness. And sometimes rye goes slightly floral. There's a slightly floral note to this. This is fairly complex. This is the Thomas Handy collection. It is 16 years old, from 2019 by Buffalo Trace. So this is one that I feel like when I've gone into a nice cigar lounge, or I think one of the first places I ever had this outside of the distillery was many years ago when we started this whole thing called Bourbon Blog, was at a place called Blue Smoke Barbecue in New York, and we went in to film it, and the owner got out a bottle of the George T. Stagg Antique Collection because we all knew how stinking special it was, and said, I want you guys to try this. This is one that just holds a lot of good memories, and that people always say has a lot of power, a lot of boldness. This is 116.9 proof. It is the lowest proof in the George T. Stagg Antique Collection history. And, when you think of this one, you're always thinking about, I think, for those of you that have had it, if you haven't had this, I can already tell you from the nose, this is a real must-try. There is just, if you took, bold and barrel and just deep roots of Kentucky, and you put it just right into an aroma, this would be it. Yeah, that's good. It has a nice there's some different notes it hits. There's obviously different points. It's kind of like a roller coaster where it starts off like here, then goes down, then comes back up. Kind of to come back and say, hello, I'm still here. Here we go. Great. I can see this being a perfect pairing for a really nice cigar that you've been waiting to try. Really delicious. We've always seen things like dark chocolate and cocoa and cacao and espresso be descriptors of this. I wouldn't say it's going as far into some of the really earthy notes as it has before, but it is still really going straight into boldness and nice balance. So if you're tasting all these, right, I've done 5 of these now, there is something so signature on the Buffalo Trace collection, anything you're tasting, that has been aged in so many of the wonderful warehouses at Buffalo Trace. These warehouses truly are magical, with the hand of the distiller, the master distiller. You're looking at Harlan Wheatley's experience, and everyone who's touched these barrels. There's something that I think that Buffalo Trace hits because of their history, because of their their recipe, their warehouses, people involved, that goes into notes that no other distillery does. And I think you have to try enough of these to really know those. To me, it's a lot of warehouse, it's a lot of barrel, it's the softness meets boldness in one glass. If I had to pick one of these as my favorite, and I'm not gonna, I feel tempted to go through the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and tell you. I think some of them would be ties for me. I would say if there was one of these that I was like the most excited about, I'd say it was probably the Thomas Handy Rye. For me, I really do love ryes. Of the bourbons, I would say it would be, it'd probably be this George II Stack. Though I love the rest, and I think the rest are something so spectacular every year. Those would be my two standouts. Now, come back tomorrow. I'm outside right now. It's not exactly just warm out here. It's cooler, so this is all affecting the flavor. Might be a different story, but no matter what, we are grateful for you taking the time to watch me talk about the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection 2019, as we've had an unboxing here today. And thanks, Buffalo Trace, for letting us try these. Folks at Buffalo Trace do such a splendid job. And cheers to the Antique Collection. And we'll be unboxing something again for you very soon. I'm Tom Fischer at bourbonblog.com.